The house was silent when he walked in, a silence that didn't belong to the place, but to time itself. Billionaire Adrian Moretti stopped on the threshold of the front door, holding his breath as if he were holding back a secret on the verge of escaping. The smell of old, damp wood, mixed with the faint talcum scent his mother used in the 80s, stabbed into his memory with a soft yet devastating precision. He came back as one of the most powerful names in America, owner of companies, empires, decisions that stirred markets, but also as someone who carried an emptiness that money had never been able to fill. As he walked down the narrow hallway, something caught his attention. The door to his old bedroom was slightly ajar, as if waiting for him. Behind it, a small object rested on the cold floor, as though it had slid off the shelf under the weight of time. It was a box, dark wood, no lid, no ornaments, nothing that should draw attention, and yet Adrian felt his heartbeat quicken. When he approached, he realized the box wasn't empty. Inside, there was a yellowed envelope, folded with care, as if placed there by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The paper seemed to breathe, as if trying to tell a story before being touched. There was also a small object wrapped in a navy blue cloth, a cloth he recognized immediately. It was the same fabric his mother used to store the important things. What he didn't know yet was that this simple, unadorned box was about to break apart the entire life he had built. And the question the world would later ask was simple: who is the man behind this fortune? And what secret had his family tried to hide for decades? Before we begin, comment below which state you're watching from. Tube televisions, corded phones, crumpled newspapers arriving in the morning, and a future that always seemed uncertain, depending on luck, effort, or something greater that no one could quite explain. Adrian's mother, Rosa Moretti, was a cleaning lady, a small woman with calloused hands who left the house before sunrise and often returned long after he had already eaten dinner. Despite her hard life, she carried a quiet dignity, always wearing the same tired smile, always keeping the same navy blue cloth where she stored the important things, those that, according to her, protected the family from forgetting who they truly were. Little Adrian grew up in that environment, between the lack of money and the excess of dreams, between the loneliness of spending hours alone and the hope his mother placed in every word she spoke. That simple house, now abandoned, had been the stage for all the wounds he carried, and for a secret he believed had been buried forever. At 7 years old, Adrian Moretti already knew the world was far too heavy for a boy so small. He learned early to wait for his mother sitting on the doorstep, watching the street, as if he were keeping time itself under surveillance. The sun faded slowly, painting the sky orange, and the shadows of the trees stretched across the dusty ground. While the other children chased deflated balls, Adrian stayed quiet, holding a plastic toy car, missing one of its wheels, the only toy he owned. Rosa Moretti arrived exhausted, her cleaning uniform stained with products she never once complained about carrying. Her smile always appeared the moment she saw her son, as if the weight of the entire day were left outside the house in that single instant. She hugged him tightly, breathed in the scent of his childhood, and repeated the same mantra she had said for years: "One day, my son, you'll become everything I never had the chance to be." Those words would shape his destiny, even decades later. The Moretti house was small, made of old wood, with a roof that groaned on windy nights. It had no luxury, no comfort, but it held memories. It was there that Rosa kept her few belongings, carefully arranged on a crooked shelf: old photos, a worn-out Bible, a notebook where she wrote down expenses she tried to balance, like someone attempting to hold water between their fingers, and the famous navy blue cloth. The cloth was sacred. She never opened it near Adrian. She said that inside it were the things that could never be lost, and over time, the boy grew to fear that bundle as much as he respected it. Like every poor child of that era, Adrian learned to grow up faster than he wanted. His father had left before he even turned 2, leaving behind only an Italian surname and an absence so big it seemed to fill the entire living room. Rosa never spoke of him. When someone asked, she would simply change the subject with a smile that was too short, too quick, too painful to be real. Life followed a strict rhythm: rice, beans, overdue bills, and the constant effort to turn very little into just enough. The neighbors knew the Moretti story, but no one asked questions out of respect, pity, or because everyone there carried their own burdens. Even so, everyone liked Rosa. There was a light in her even on the greyest days. At school, Adrian was the quiet boy, the one who sat in the back and avoided drawing attention. He had no new clothes, no lunch, no one to pick him up afterward. But something about him caught the teacher's attention, his eyes. He looked at the world as if he were always a few steps ahead of everyone, as if he saw possibilities adults couldn't. The first spark of talent appeared when he was only 9. His math teacher caught him solving advanced problems that weren't part of the lesson. He broke down complex equations with the same ease as breathing. "This boy is different," she told the principal, who just smiled, unaware she was looking at the future billionaire who would change the landscape of American technology. But talent didn't save him from humiliation. The torn shoes, ripped notebooks, hand-me-down clothes, everything was a reason for mockery. And no matter how hard he tried to act strong, every night Adrian cried quietly, facing the wall so his mother wouldn't hear. One day, however, something happened, a simple detail, but one that changed the way he saw the world. Rosa came home from work holding an object in her hands, a used, rusty typewriter with loose keys. She had found it in the trash of one of the buildings she cleaned. For most people, it was just junk. For her, it was a chance to give her son a tool to dream with. "I know you like to write your things, your numbers, your drawings, so I thought you could use this." Adrian would never forget the light in his mother's eyes that day. He spent hours exploring the machine, pressing keys that didn't respond, listening to the dry click of tired metal. It didn't work, but that didn't matter. It was his. It was a symbol. It was a silent promise that his life could become more than the neighborhood said it would. As the years passed, Adrian's talent grew alongside his ambition. He began studying on his own, hidden in the school library. He read about companies, inventions, business, technology, long before the internet became common. He admired people who rose from nothing and built empires. "One day, I'll do the same," he promised himself, unaware that the future would take him far beyond anything he imagined. But something kept him from moving forward completely. The past, the navy blue cloth, his mother's silence, the locked room in the house, the one he was never allowed to enter. Every family has secrets, but some guard secrets capable of changing destinies. And Adrian Moretti was about to discover that the source of his strength came precisely from what he had been taught to forget. Eugene's house had a silence that almost seemed to carry weight. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the presence of memories drifting slowly through the halls, like shadows only he could see. On certain cold mornings, like that one, he felt that loneliness watched him from the kitchen doorway, waiting to follow him for the rest of the day. And yet, there was something inside that house that had never abandoned him. The small tabletop radio, the one with the cracked display and the wood darkened by age. It sat on the kitchen counter near the window. Eugene had the habit of touching it gently before turning it on, as if it were an old friend, or perhaps a memory he didn't have the courage to let die. But on that particular day, when he turned the dial and the local station crackled to life, something inside him trembled. The song that played wasn't ordinary. It was a melody he hadn't heard in 20, maybe 30 years, a soft, slow tune that seemed to open ancient doors in his memory. Eugene leaned against the sink and took a deep breath. That song had been Margaret's favorite, his late wife. She used to hum it while making breakfast. He could almost hear her laugh behind the melody, as if she were standing there, leaning on the doorframe, wearing her floral apron and that tired yet always lively smile. For a moment, he closed his eyes, and the world became 1989 again. The kitchen was smaller, filled with light, and smelled of apple pie. Margaret gently swayed to the music, moving her hips playfully while he watched her, pretending to organize the newspapers just to savor the moment. "You know, Eugene, when you look at me like that, I almost believe we're still young." And he would answer, "Margaret, I'd look at you like that even if the world ended." The radio crackled and pulled him back to the present. The kitchen was cold, the air still. The apple pie had been replaced by bitter, lonely coffee. Eugene ran a hand over his face, trying to push away the old pain that insisted on returning. But in that instant, something changed. The radio host said, "And now, a special dedication to everyone who misses someone. because some memories don't disappear. They only sleep. Eugene felt his heart tighten. For some reason, those words sounded like a warning, as if someone or something wanted to get his attention. He didn't know it yet, but from that morning on, the radio would begin to bring not only songs, but messages. And each message would open a door to the past Eugene believed he had locked away forever. His story, and the story of the voice that would appear in the days to come, was just beginning. In the days that followed, Eugene kept his calm, repetitive routine. He woke up early, brewed his coffee, made his bed, and walked to the porch to watch the world move without him. It was a simple life, a quiet life, but the radio had seemed different ever since that morning with Margaret's song. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't something anyone else would notice, but Eugene noticed. He had always noticed the small things. Maybe that's why he remembered the past so well. Sometimes, at the end of a music track, right before the next host spoke, he heard a whisper, a short, quick murmur, like someone trying to adjust a microphone on the other side. Eugene tilted his head, furrowed his brows, leaned in closer. Can you hear me? It was almost that. Almost. But the static soon swallowed everything, and the broadcast continued normally. He tried to ignore it. It's just interference, he told himself. The device is old. My head is old. But that Friday morning, at exactly 10:14 a.m., something happened for the first time. Eugene was washing the dishes, the soap suds rising between his fingers, when the radio broadcast simply stopped. No warning, no power outage, nothing. A heavy silence filled the kitchen. He turned, dried his hands on a towel, and walked slowly to the radio, giving the wooden casing a gentle tap, an old habit. The static began, faint but steady, and then a voice emerged. It wasn't the usual host. It wasn't an advertisement. It was a soft, steady voice with a strange tone, not exactly sad, but carrying something Eugene couldn't identify. Eugene! The plate slipped from his hand and dropped into the sink with a dull sound. The voice repeated, "Can you hear me, Eugene?" He froze. His breath caught. His heart raced as if trying to make up for decades of stillness. How is this possible, he thought. The voice seemed to know his name, seemed to call him, seemed to be waiting for an answer. Eugene stepped closer, taking short, hesitant steps. Who's there?" he asked, his voice hoarse, fragile, broken. There was a brief moment of silence on the other side of the radio, a listening silence, almost human. And then, "Someone who remembers you." Eugene felt his whole body tremble. There was no way to turn it off, no place to run, because for the first time since Margaret had passed, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, the strange sensation that the past was coming back for him. And that voice was only the beginning. The kitchen felt smaller. The air was heavier, as if time had stopped only there, inside that old house that held more memories than furniture. Eugene moved slowly toward the radio, feeling his legs tremble. The voice had sounded so real, so close, so clear. It wasn't like those occasional interferences coming from distant stations. It was a crisp, deliberate voice, as if the person was standing just on the other side of the door. He leaned forward, gripping the edges of the sink to steady himself, and asked, Who are you?" The radio crackled for a second far too long, and then the voice returned, this time even softer. "Someone who has always been by your side." Eugene's eyes widened. "That doesn't make sense," he murmured. "None of this makes any sense." He looked around the kitchen, as if expecting to find someone there, hidden, watching him, but there was no one. Only him, the silence, and that old radio that seemed to have awakened from a long sleep. "Why are you talking to me?" he asked cautiously. The reply came with a calmness that sent shivers down his spine. "Because it's time for you to remember." Remember. Remember what? The past, the house, the family, or something he himself had buried so deeply he no longer knew it existed? Eugene felt his chest tighten. This wasn't right. It couldn't be right. He walked to the outlet and grabbed the cord firmly, ready to pull it and put an end to this once and for all. But before he could make a move, the voice said, "Eugene, please, don't go." He froze, not just because of the plea, but because of the tone. It was as if the voice felt fear of being alone, fear of losing him. "What do you want from me?" he asked, now more irritated than confused. The radio crackled again, as if fighting to keep the transmission alive. "You found the box, didn't you?" Eugene's heart pounded. He stepped back twice. How do you know? His breathing shortened. Cold sweat dripped down his neck. The voice answered without hesitation. Because I'm in it. Eugene brought a hand to his chest, startled. And now that you've opened it, I can speak to you again. The radio went completely silent. The static stopped. The broadcast never returned. It was as if the device had been switched off from the inside. Eugene's knees weakened, and he had to steady himself against the table. The voice was inside the box. What did that even mean? How was that possible? Or worse, if that were true, who was talking to him? The past had just knocked on the door, and it didn't seem willing to leave. The night advanced without Eugene noticing. The old clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m., yet he was still there, standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the radio as if it were a living creature. The box remained on the table, open, its objects scattered like small witnesses of a past that had never rested. The silence in the house was so deep it almost hurt. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a pregnant silence, a silence carrying memories, old voices, footsteps that no longer existed, the kind of silence old houses keep when they still love those who are gone. Eugene took a deep breath. He needed to understand what was happening. He returned to the box and began sorting the objects one by one. He wanted clarity. He wanted logic. But each item seemed to tell a fragmented story, like torn pages from a forgotten book. His mother's photograph, the notebook with messages, the key, the folded note, and the recording, that damned recording. He stared at the tape recorder for a long time. The red light was still off, as if the device were exhausted. But Eugene knew that machine had been the centerpiece of everything, and in a way he still didn't understand, perhaps the centerpiece of his own life. He sat down, ran his hands over his face, and finally whispered, "Let's end this." Rewind. Click-clack. Play. The static returned, soft, like a breath from the past crossing decades to reach him. And then the voice came back, the same voice that had called to him through the radio. But now it wasn't talking to him. It was talking to someone from the past. If he's listening to this, it means I'm no longer here. Eugene froze. The voice continued, slow and gentle, like a final exhale from someone with much to say and little time to explain. "I could never tell. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the strength. But he needs to know. He needs to remember who he is." Eugene's stomach twisted. The voice was his mother's. That voice, one he hadn't heard in over 30 years, hit him like a punch to the chest. There was no mistaking it. His heart clenched. His hands trembled. His eyes instantly filled with tears. It was her. It was truly her. His mother. But why? Why this? Why a tape? Why hide everything inside a box locked with a mysterious key? He covered his mouth, trying to control his sobbing as the recording continued. "Eugene, my son, if you're listening to this, it means I failed at something I promised I'd protect forever. But I had no choice, and now you need to learn the truth." Eugene pressed a hand to his chest. It felt like his heart might stop. The tape went on. "You weren't born here." Not exactly. Her voice sounded weaker now, as if each phrase required all the strength she had left. "You came to me on a stormy night. When I was only 20, I was working as a janitor in a small countryside hospital." Eugene frowned. A hospital? A storm? None of that was part of the story she used to tell. His mother continued, "That night, my God, Eugene, I will never forget it. A baby had been left at the hospital door, abandoned, newborn. No one knew who the parents were. No information, no name, no record." Eugene held his head in his hands. No, but yes, what he had feared his entire life was revealing itself. I couldn't do it. I couldn't just leave you there. I held you in my arms, and you opened your eyes for the first time, and I knew I had found the purpose of my life." Her voice broke. "I gave you my name. I brought you home. I raised you with everything I had, which wasn't much, but it was everything of mine." Eugene began to cry for real. A childlike cry. The cry of something breaking and rebuilding at the same time. His entire life, his origin, everything he believed, everything was different, but the recording wasn't done. "I tried to protect you from the truth, because I knew that once you discovered who you really are, nothing would be the same." Eugene went pale. Who he really is. He swallowed hard, waiting for the next sentence, as if his life depended on it. "You weren't abandoned, Eugene. You were hidden." The air left his lungs as if someone had struck him. Hidden from whom? home. Why? The answer came, because you are the child of someone powerful, someone who could never admit your existence. Eugene's mind spun. No, impossible, insane. But the tape continued. I could never say his name. Never. There were men, important men, looking for you. Men who would do anything to keep the secret buried. A chill ran down his spine. I gave my life to protect you, Eugene. My work, my dignity, my youth, everything. Her voice trembled. And I would give it all again. The tape went on, but her voice was fading, as if her time were running out. If you found this box, it means someone tried to erase the past. Someone who didn't want you to discover the truth. Eugene looked around, nervous. He remembered the radio, the voice, the sensation that someone was trying to reach him. But I left clues for you, in the objects, in the words, in the house. Everything you need to know is here. She paused for several long seconds, as if gathering every last piece of strength. Then she said, your father was not an ordinary man. Eugene leaned forward, heart racing. He was the founder of the corporation you now run. Eugene choked on his own breath. The tape continued. You inherited more than you imagine, my son. Your talent, your mind, your vision. But the price for it was my life. Tears streamed down his face. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to grow up to be a good man, a free man. I didn't want you to carry the weight of his name. Silence, deep silence. And then, Eugene, my son, if you're listening to this, I want you to know that I loved you more than any truth, more than my own life. The tape hissed loudly, then again, and finally, forgive me, and it ended. Eugene sat there unable to breathe for several minutes. Everything collapsed and aligned at the same time. His mother was not his biological mother, but she was the only mother he ever truly had. His father, his real father, was the man who built his fortune, the same company he now ran, the same company where he grew up being humiliated by directors who said he had no pedigree, the company built by the man who denied him, the company he had sworn to transform. He remained there, motionless, staring at the box, and for the first time everything made sense. The photo, the notebook, the note, the key, the recording, and the voice on the radio. None of it was a coincidence. It had been planned, prepared, anticipated, perhaps for decades. When he finally managed to stand, Eugene walked through the house as if he were stepping into another world. He opened the door to his old bedroom, saw the worn-out mattress, the drawings on the wall, the broken window that had never been fixed. And there in the corner, he found the second piece of the puzzle, a small wooden box, identical to the first, but with an inscription on the lid. When you are ready, he trembled, took a deep breath, and opened it. Inside, there was only a letter, a handwritten letter. On the back, a date 1989, the year he turned 4. Eugene opened it carefully. The handwriting was his mother's. The letter said, my son, if you've reached this point, it means you finally understand that your story did not begin with me, but it ends with me. I was only the ground on which you could walk until you had the strength to fly. Now go live your life without fear of the truth. At the end, there was just one more line. I always believed you would be great, but never because of blood, always because of your soul. And that was it. No signature, no farewell, no mystery, just love. A love so great that it crossed decades, sealed boxes, old radios, and forgotten tapes. A love so great that it finally found its destination. Eugene returned to the kitchen. He looked at the radio. This time everything was completely silent. No static, no voice, nothing. As if the past had fulfilled its purpose and gone back to sleep. He turned off the light, picked up the box, and before leaving the house, looked back one last time and said with a trembling voice, "Thank you, Mom." Then he left, and the silence of the house finally rested. The morning was born slowly, as if afraid to touch the house that had kept so many secrets. Light filtered through the broken blinds, casting streaks of brightness across the dusty floor. Eugene stood on the porch, holding the box to his chest, feeling the cold wind hit his face, the same wind he remembered as a child, running barefoot through the yard. But that day, something was different. The weight he had carried his entire life finally had a name, finally had a place, finally had a voice, the voice of his adoptive mother, the only mother who had truly loved him. He descended the 3 steps of the porch slowly, as one who knows they are leaving something sacred behind. Before getting into the car, he turned for one last look. The house seemed smaller, more fragile, yet at the same time more alive than it had ever been. It was as if, now that the secret had been freed, it could finally rest. Eugene ran his hand over the door, feeling the texture of the aged wood, and took a deep breath. He thought of everything he had lost, of everything he had learned, and of everything he still needed to do. The pain had not disappeared, it had merely changed form. Now it was a pain that taught, a pain that embraced, a pain that transformed. When he got into the car and started the engine, the sun finally rose fully on the horizon, illuminating the old house one last time. Eugene smiled, a small but genuine smile, and he thought, some stories are not written in ink, but in scars that never stop teaching. Then he drove away, and the past, for the first time, did not stay behind. It rested in peace.